In 1864, a group of pioneers were sent eastward from Parowan, Utah, over the old Spanish Trail, to establish a town they eventually named Panguitch, which means fish in the Paiute language. Now, Panguitch sits at an altitude of 6,660 feet and has a very short growing season. So late that summer, just as they were hoping to harvest their first crops, they got surprised by an early killing frost and heavy snow. Well, at first, they tried harvesting the immature green wheat heads and boiling and eating them. It tasted awful and wasn't nourishing. So then they tried to live off fish and wild game, but they couldn't get near enough to feed everybody. They tried sending a group north to Gunnison, to the flour mill, but they couldn't get through the deep snow. Their last hope to avoid starvation was to send a group westward over the old Spanish Trail again, back 40 miles and over the 8,100-foot mountain pass to Parowan, where there was another flour mill. 7 men volunteered to make the perilous journey. All they would have to keep from freezing to death in the bitter cold nights on those high mountains was the quilts off their beds. The leader and the oldest member of the expedition was 66-year-old Jesse Lauder. How many of you are 66 years old or older? Yeah. He was a carpenter and had survived other duels with this enemy named starvation. Then there was 50-year-old Thomas Jefferson Adair, or if you're from southern Utah, Thomas Jefferson Adair, who was a hunter, wheelwright, cooper, furniture maker, and a former sharpshooter in the Seminole Wars in Florida. At one time, he single-handedly held off an entire mob who wanted to tar and feather him for joining those Mormons. After all, he was the star tenor in the Methodist choir. But they knew he was a crack shot, and they wouldn't dare show their faces over the ridge line because they knew Thomas could get them. Well, he won that battle, but he later lost the battle with cholera off Mount Pisgah, Iowa, where he had to bury his wife and 2 children. He didn't want to lose again. Then there was 21-year-old Alexander Matheson from Dundee, Scotland, who 3 months earlier had married Lydia Evans. She was pregnant with their first child. 4 more men rounded out the 7-man expedition. They started off with a light wagon pulled by 2 teams of oxen, thinking that those 2 teams could just push their way through the snow. But by the time they got only to the 7,000-foot level of Lower Bear Valley, the oxen could no longer pull through the snow. They had to abandon the wagon, break out the hay they brought for the oxen, and they tried to walk across the surface of the snow. But the crust wasn't strong enough to support their weight, and they kept breaking through into waist-deep snow. You can't move in waist-deep snow. So then they tried forming a single file line with the lead man pounding with his fists and stomping with his feet to form a narrow slit, and those behind deepening and widening of the trench. And then as the lead man became exhausted, they would rotate around. But very soon they could tell they were never going to make it in time to save either themselves or their families back in Panguitch. Will you help me keep a trail-breaking rhythm? As you hear, first of all, tell you what, let's not clap, let's stomp. There you go. You'll hear first from Thomas Jefferson Adair, and then from Alexander Matheson. I fought Seminoles in Florida, held Alabama, March Bay, fought cholera at Mount Pisgah, and lost 3 of my family to the grave. But this enemy staring back at me makes me shake down to my bones. I'll lose Mary and all the children too. If we can't bring some food back home, won't you get us over this mountain, Lord, over this great divide? Part this this frozen sea, get me and my brothers to the other side. We trusted you in coming here, so won't you make the pathway clear? Won't you get us over this mountain, Lord? Don't let our journey end here. Lydia's beautiful and dutiful. Aye, she means all the world to me. And leaving her 3 months pregnant was worse than leaving me home in Dundee. But although I feared, yet I volunteered, 'cause there's just no other way. I'll lose Lydia and my firstborn too. If we can't break more trail today, won't you get us over this mountain, Lord, over this great divide? Part this frozen sea, get me and my brothers to the other side. We trusted you in coming here, so won't you make the pathway clear? Won't you get us over this mountain, Lord? Don't let our journey end here. There isn't time to build an ark, no wings on which to fly, no path around and no tunnel underneath the mountain high. So Lord, we need a miracle like we've never needed one before. Like when Moses struck the rock, we need to walk on through to knock at salvation's door. Won't you get us over this mountain, Lord, over this great divide? Part this frozen sea, get me and my brothers to the other side. They trusted you in coming here, so won't you make the pathway clear? Won't you get us over this mountain, Lord? Don't let our journey end here. So I suppose you'd like to know how it turned out. Well, they figured they needed divine help. So one of them unrolled his bedroll, his quilt, from off his back, spread it out over the surface of the snow, and they climbed up out of the trench they'd been making. They knelt in a circle, each taking a turn to pray. At some point in that process, one of them said, "Brethren, as long as we're on this quilt, we're not breaking through the crust of the snow." The quilt acted like a giant snowshoe, spreading their weight over a larger surface area. So they took out another quilt, and laying it in line with the first, and advancing from one quilt to the next, always pulling the rear quilt up to become the front quilt, they began quilt walking over the mountain, 19 miles, until they got to Paragona, where they took a wagon down to Parowan, got 7 100-pound sacks of flour, put them on their back, and went back to Paragona and started quilt walking up Little Creek Canyon again, through Upper and Lower Bear Valley to their wagon, put the flour in the wagon, and went back to Panguitch and saved the village from starvation. That's why to this day they have a quilt walk festival the second weekend in June, next weekend. And they have a quilt walk park in the center of town with a statue of Jesse Lauder throwing out a quilt as if he were going on a picnic, but he's really going to save a village.